you may very well ask yourself why this session is called Treacle, Tart and Music, or whatever it's called. And it goes back to those magic moments, those watershed moments, those heaven-sent moments at the beginning of Nicci's and my John's campaign journey. And Nicci went down to the Royal Brighton and Sussex Hospital to visit Lucy Frost, who's often known on Twitter as Lucy Jane Masters, who is a really outstanding dementia care nurse, who was at that time running Emerald Ward, which was a wonderful ward. She welcomed Nicci, and what Nicci learned from that was something about the difference that carers make, not just to the person they're caring for, but to other people. Now, Nicci came back with this wonderful little treacle tart story. So, Nicci, can you give us the treacle tart, please?
Yeah, this is really just because Lucy can't be here. So imagine I'm Lucy. So Lucy, when the day I went, I think it was the day before, we were talking about those people who aren't lucky enough to have carers, of which there are many, and what it's like for them if they see people all around them who do have carers, and whether that makes them feel kind of lonelier, and whether it's kind of it's almost a disadvantage to them to have carers in the wards who are not there for them. And she told me this story that had happened, I think it was just the day before or a few days before, of a man in her ward whose, I think it was his 80th birthday. So he had dementia, quite advanced dementia, and he had no carer. And they asked him what he wanted for his birthday, and he said that what he wanted was a treacle tart, because that's what his mother used to make for him on his birthdays when he was a little boy. And they went to the kitchen, but it was too late for the kitchen to make a treacle tart. So one of the nurses ran to the co-op and bought a treacle tart and bought some candles and took it back to the ward. And they lit the candles. And then all the nurses who were free and many of the other carers and many of the other patients in the ward gathered around this man's bed. And they sang happy birthday to him, and he blew out his candles and ate his treacle tart. And she was saying that pretty much everybody was crying. I mean, crying in a good way, crying because it was like life kind of flooding in to the ward. It was like a kind of care and community being brought into a space that he was scared in. And so that was her story about how having carers on a ward is good for everyone on the ward, that carers will attend to other people as well. And it made me feel very kind of uplifted. And so on behalf of Lucy Frost, I wanted to share that with you.
Thanks, Nicci. And I was invited up to the Morecambe Bay group of hospitals at Lancaster, and I went for their conference and hadn't been to many conferences, and I went up these rather splendid stairs in a sort of Art Nouveau building, and there at the top of the stairs was a harpist playing, and I thought, this is absolutely wonderful. Now, the harpist, her name is Mary Dunsford, is a member of Music in Healthcare, and what was eye-opening for me was how different music is when it's in a healthcare setting as to when you're giving a concert. And Mary explained that really well. But Mary is a colleague of Nick and Sarah here. And so what I've asked Nick and Sarah to do, they're from OPUS Music and Music in Healthcare, and it is a skill and a technique that you'll learn. I'd like them to imagine that we are a rather overcrowded ward of possibly very varied and rather confused people, and it's a bit hot and stuffy. We're having a tough time, and I would like Nick and Sarah to explain how them bringing their music onto their wards, as Mary took her harp, I think it was every Thursday, to Furness General Hospital, how it will make it different for us in our, particularly in our ward situation. Okay, so we're all in the dementia ward, and Nick and Sarah are going to sort of make it better for us. Right. Nick and Sarah, OPUS Music.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me okay? I'm going to pop in here just for the moment. So I've hidden my notes over here. I apologise if I keep looking at my notes. And just very quickly introduce ourselves. As mentioned, we're from a company called OPUS, which is a community interest company specialising in taking music into healthcare settings. And we are trained through European programmes, and particularly by a company called Musique et Santé, which is my best French accent. That's as good as it gets, I'm afraid, who pioneered this work in France, partly because of an agreement between the Ministry for Health and the Ministry for Culture that says when people are in a healthcare setting, they should have access to culture, that it's a right and it is something that is very important to their health and well-being. That they've been able to pioneer this kind of work through that kind of agreement, through that understanding. We follow that, follow those principles. And over the past 6 years, I've been working a lot in paediatric settings, in neonatal settings, in accident and emergency settings, quite a variety of settings. And we've been able to take that learning that we've been learning about from children's care into adult settings, into elderly settings, and into dementia settings very recently. And that's due to support from Arts Council England, and the hospitals that we're currently working with on this programme, which is University Hospitals Leicester. And so over here, Justine Allen. You want to wave, Justine? Hello. Is patient experience sister, is that right, Justine? And is pioneering this work on behalf of Leicester Hospitals to take music onto the dementia wards and older people's wards at Leicester Hospitals. And Kingsmill Hospital was the other hospital that we're working very closely with at the moment. That's enough about that. We're going to play some music. And on the table outside, if you've not already picked one up, some of our leaflets. And we put on the back of those some of the impacts that music in healthcare can have. But we're not actually here to talk about any of those. What I'd like to talk to you a little bit about is more about the holistic, the human impacts of the work that we do, and to experience a little bit of that with you. I think it's fair to say that music really reaches quite deep into the soul of a person. And I'm sure a lot of you are sitting here now with this music, and there's some kind of memory, there's a response, there's something that you can relate that music to. There's something that it brings back. And music's not just related to memory, but to emotion. And it hits at the real core of our emotional systems in our primitive brains. And this primitive brain is something that is really tapped into by music. Many areas of the brain that the music taps into. But the primitive brain is really hit by music and triggers these emotions. And these emotions become memories, become experiences that we remember. Even after we've forgotten the music, we can remember the experiences of them. So, music is definitely something that is around us. It's something that we hear, we listen to in the car, we hear in the supermarket, we hear in everyday life. It's something that's with us from the beginning of life and hopefully to the end of life. Music and our choice of music and what we listen to, what we play, what we join in with, what we engage with, is part of our identity. You think about young people growing up and how their identities are formed so clearly by the music they listen to. I think that's something that goes on through our lives. I have an identity that's somewhere between Queen and ABBA. I'm not quite sure what that says about me, other than that I obviously like 4 pieces. OPUS, by the way, is a 4-piece. I've had an idea. So, if it's around us and it's something that is within us and it's part of our identity, why should we be denying this kind of musical and cultural engagement to people within a hospital environment? And that's really what we're working on, to try and make sure that these ideas of identity and ideas of normality aren't stripped away by something such as dementia. We've been working a little bit with a couple of people who are experts on creativity and the brain, and looking at the human connections that we create with people through making music. Being there as musicians with people. And we're going to be there with musicians with you for the next 5 minutes for you to experience this a little. And the connection that we have with people that doesn't need words, it doesn't need pleasantries, that allows music to be our communicator together. So, we're going to play another little piece of music for you, and we'll invite you to be musicians with us, much as we do on the wards that we work on.
To let your inner musician out. We all have one, you know. Anybody feel that joy? And a choice of colour, look. Thank you. Am I going to get round everybody? I'm not sure I am. Cute. Oh, you've got a special one. Hello. Come. Share them round. I've got 5 more. We've got a lovely tapping hand there. That's it, I'm out. Very welcome, very welcome.
Thank you. Well, this kind of musical engagement is the kind of things that we happen in small scales on wards that we work on, whether it be paediatrics or geriatrics. The idea of creativity and fun and engagement and life is what we can bring as musicians, as cultural people together. We can do that together. And that's what a lot of this work allows us to do. It can be very personal. It can be one-to-one, just playing with an instrument or with a voice or with a song that can be moulded into something that is very suitable and fitting for the person that we're working with. It can become a social celebration. We're back to the sea again. Ideally with, what was it, chocolates and champagne? Yeah. Something else to add to the bag, I think. Chocolates and champagne.
There's been quite a lot of talk today about remembering the family and including normality in people's lives in hospital. And to remember that play and creativity are fundamentally part of every single human being. It's right there, deep in the brain, and very important part of everybody, whether you are well or otherwise. And we like to think of this work as playing with and being creative with the well part of that person and helping to validate them as a well person, as well as having the illness or the difficulty that they're suffering at the time. So, yeah.
So, I'd like to just give you a very quick story of something that happened on one of the wards that we're working on. And this is with an elderly patient. Excuse me. An elderly patient on a hospital ward who we encountered sat hunched over one of those hospital tables, sat in his chair, hunched over the table, with a family member at the side with no interaction or engagement. He was just sat there looking down at his table. And we were told afterwards that he'd been like that for days and hadn't really been much of an engagement. The family hadn't been able to engage him. And as soon as we came to the ward, myself and Ollie, my colleague Ollie, walked onto the ward, there's a beckoning from the other adult that was in the room, and the carer that was with them, and said, "Come over." And they recognised that there's something there within the music that was going to be good for this person. And as we began to play, his finger came out like this, and I got really close to my guitar until it was pretty much laying on the table, and his finger just gently across the strings, and I was able to play chords, and Ollie, who was playing melodeon, just accompanied as he played across the strings. And he went from being somebody that was sat hunched over a table to somebody that was just engaged in what was happening around him, was able to have eye contact and engagement with the carer, who also joined in then with the music. And we became a real community of music making together. It was later that we found out from the carer that he'd actually been a professional guitarist in a very famous band, but nobody knew this. Nobody knew anything about his life in the past. But once this was revealed and recognised as something of value, the hospital team were considering that, what can we do? What can we do to support this? How can we change this? The carer that was there was enabled to say, there's something I can contribute, there's something that will make this person stay in hospital better. It's just one small story of this kind of work and the kind of things that we see when we're working on the wards. So I'm going to close with a statement which I'm going to read to you. It says that music making delivered by specially trained musicians makes no demands upon patients, but reaches out to and enhances the well part of the person. It creates a new space and time, masking the clinical space and replacing it with one for culture, vitality and engagement. And we feel incredibly privileged to be delivering this work, making music on a daily basis with patients, their family members and staff who become musicians with us. So a challenge to us, and perhaps to yourselves as well, is to really think, how can we ensure that this kind of cultural opportunity is available to hospital patients on a sustainable basis, especially for those living with dementia, and for whom this is often one of the few things that makes any sense and connection with the world around them. Thank you very much.
Thank you.